don't qualify for these, that means you can just go to another kind of patent, or you can go to a copyright, a trademark, a trade secret. I mean, there's other protections. So patent is kind of a more of a specific thing. And it branches into design patents, plant patents, and utility. Utilities, what most people are familiar with. So a utility is something that relates to a function, a product that has a function, as opposed to a decorative, artistic type thing.
Does who regulates or has the ruling of what is patentable, what is not, who can do a licensing or this or that, or how do they determine that?
Well, patent patent law goes back to probably 1600s in England, and then in this country it started in the late 1700s, and so that the test of something just being new compared to what's in the public domain was probably always there, and then it's been refined over time. But the law doesn't change too awfully much. I mean, before the what's called the American Invents Act that went into force in 2013, and hadn't been changed since the early 50s before that. So somewhat slow moving, but we can talk about some aspects to help you understand. So anyway, the four tests are statutory subject matter. That's one. Number two is utility. Number three is novelty. And number four is non-obviousness. And so the fourth test, non-obviousness, is usually the one you get hung up and the hardest to get over. And it's got the most subtlety or, say, complication and sort of understanding what that's all about. And the patent office is not always entirely consistent on that. And, well, we work for ways to get around it too. Anyway, we'll start with the simple stuff. The statutory subject matter. This is like a first filter, so people can't get patents on things that are products of nature or occur in the natural world. So, I mean, in a very roughest form, you've got the natural world and the non-natural world, right? The natural world is everything that would be here without humans, right? The sky, the air, land, lakes, ocean, forests, jungle, all that. And then, so you can say, well, that breaks down into three worlds, which is the natural world, the artificial world, and then the, I guess, metaphysical world, or the belief world, I guess. So, or the abstract world. So, patenting, the only things that are patentable are things that happen in the non-natural world, human-made, in other words.
Mm-hmm.
So you think, well, of course, my gadget is, that's a man-made, no problem. But it gets into subtle distinctions, certainly in like life sciences, biological inventions, like someone may synthesize something that the blood does naturally and they might want to patent it. So then it's like, is this something that is really humanly done, or is this something that occurs in nature? So in biology and chemistry, that stuff can be a big deal.
And so is like copyright a real far cry from a patent, or are they both just as good?
What's that again?
A copyright? Is that right?
There's some overlap and some difference. Copyright generally covers artistic, non-utilitarian stuff. Books, movies, music, art, portraits, pictures, that sort of stuff. Sculptures, but there's certainly some overlap. Like people can patent both computer code with copyrighted patents. Sometimes we can take a device, say under a sculpture, it's got some functional and some decorative aspects, because sometimes things mix things, and you can copyright the decorative aspects of it and patent the functional. And like, say, electronic devices, like the housing or casing may have a decorative shape, but the insides of it is a utility patent. The outside could be design patent or copyright. Sometimes you can even trademark, like the shape of the logo. So it's a matter of you throw on all these protections that you can. And yeah, they do overlap sometimes. But, if someone's gonna copy the idea from you, you wanna have as much to throw at them as you can. So you always think of it as a group of things.
Some people say that, well, you don't need to worry about patent, just smother the market.
Yeah, that's the network size. I mean,
It takes a lot
it's
of
an
money to
argument
do
that
that.
you're the biggest, you have the economic advantage, which is true. But when you're starting, you don't. And without a patent, anybody can willy-nilly just take the idea and make it. And then if they're bigger and you and got more resources, you're really at a disadvantage. Plus, if you want to get investors, if you want to sell the company or the product, if you want to license it, all these things, outsiders are going to want to see some sort of exclusive rights, so they're protected. So, think of a patent as a piece of property, just like real estate.
And
It's
then,
got a lot of the same aspects, so it's just an asset in your company.
And then, come over here so I can hear you better. Anyway,
Yeah, you talk louder too, because I have.
they talk about foreign patents. Well, if you do an American patent and you want to do a foreign patent, that costs an extreme amount of money to do something like that.
Yeah, and that's, but the thing is, to get your use out of a foreign patent, you have to have a manufacturing and sales presence in the foreign country. So that's even a lot more money. So I know I've seen cases where they'll start foreign patenting and then they'll give up on it because they had to divert their resources to, the US. So it's like if you say, well, I want a patent in Germany, well, to get use out of that, you've got to have, salespeople there, maybe some manufacturing capability. You got to have your product has to have a presence
You gotta have
in that country to make
everything
it pay
right there
off.
in that country.
And so that's, that's an even bigger investment. But it depends on the product. Your product might have very good potential in Germany.
Yeah.
But what a lot of people do sometimes is to get into a foreign market that's kind of remote and difficult for them to reach, they'll partner or license to a company local in a similar product, and then use their manufacturing and their sales network to
Is that
get their
true?
product in the foreign country, because that way you've already got a company there. They can already make your product. They've got salespeople. They got the contacts. Of course, there's language and customs and all this stuff.
Is that true that they say, if you have a U.S. patent and you don't have a foreign patent, they can steal your idea and make it over there, but they can't sell it in the States?
I have no contact in the United States. So the patent gives you 5 protections: make, use, sell, offer to sell, import. So if the foreign company is knocking off the product, if they even try to sell it here, they can't. They would have to make it, use it, and sell it completely in the foreign country if you only had a U.S. patent.
They're not allowed to bring it here.
No, and not even try to sell it here or to import it. So the U.S. patent's good protection in that respect, that we have a big domestic market. So a foreign manufacturer knocking you off wants to sell in the U.S. It's a big market. So it still gives you some good protection. So they could only sell it in the foreign country.
Boy, it seems like there's a lot of technicalities involving in all
Because
that.
any bigger foreign company, if they have a new technology, they'll file a U.S. patent anyway to cover themselves. In fact, at the U.S. Patent Office, the majority of applications come from outside the country
Really?
than from inside the country. Yeah,
Holy
and that's been
smokes.
true since like the mid 2000s, 2004, I think. So a lot of
Really?
people are surprised at that, but if you compare us to the whole world, I say most of the activities probably in Asia and Europe, but if you put them together, they're bigger than us. So the inventive patenting activity is more than we have inside the country.
Really? I'll be dang.
But that's, in a sense, that's good. Like if you're doing your research and stuff, if you research US, you'll pick up technologies happening, say, in Europe and Asia.
But they'll
Because-
only copy your product only if they think it's feasible for them to do it over there in other countries. In other words, if it would be a money maker for them over there, then they'll go ahead and steal your idea. Is that correct?
Yeah, they could, if you didn't have a patent there, yeah.
Yeah.
And they could do everything there.
If you
So,
don't have a foreign patent.
because of the cost of patenting in foreign countries and having a marketing or commercial presence there, you have to think carefully about which countries you want. Right? It's too much money to cover the world, so you carefully pick 1, 2, 3, 4 countries that you feel are the, you know, are the biggest potentials, and go with them. And of course, on the money end, you know, you got to partner up and find investors, you know, to help you grow.
Yeah, it's so hard. I mean, marketing, even just marketing your product is, it's an extreme battle.
Mm-hmm.
It is, it really is. I know,
So back to the statutory subject matter, just for completeness for the video. The breakdown of the classes are, okay, it needs to be a machine, a process, what they call a manufacturer, which is really a product. And so to distinguish between a machine and a product, a machine makes products.
right.
So the machine is not a product, like a lathe in a machine shop. That's a machine. The let's say the article. I hate to use the word article because article's not really an invention in the patent world, but the product the lathe makes is the product of manufacture of the machine. Okay, and that's what most people are used to, that tangible. And then in between those is what's called a process. So that's a little harder to get your mind around, but that would be software. That could be a chemical process, you know, some sort of way of making things. It could be a manufacturing method. It could be a way of using something. So sometimes, you know, that can be more important than the product itself. Or sometimes people, they can get a patent on the process of making or using something, but not the product itself. Because it's like they figured out a new use for an old product or something like that. And then the last one is a composition of matter, so that covers bio and life sciences, but that's like
Let me get my paper, yeah.
a chemical mix or something like that. Yeah, it could be like a new plant fertilizer, or you know, whatever. It's just some of those things could come under FDA approval, some don't. It depends how you claim them. You know, like you could do some sort of maybe homeopathic thing, like you figured out a way to convert vegetables into a pill, right? So that's a machine actually. I mean, it's like, it's a process too, but I've taken, you know, raw carrots and celery and stuff, and I'm making a pill. People can take the pill. And I'm saying the nutritional benefit is the same as eating the vegetables. So I'm not claiming anything new for nutritional benefit. I'm claiming, you know, I'm able to convert the raw vegetables to a pill with a shelf life. So it's certainly patent. Will you take it off?
Yeah, you're going over a lot of stuff I already been through.
All right, did you wanna, well, I guess there's hardly enough people here to talk about your presentation. When was it again?
Can't go on. Week after next.
Week after next, okay.
So
Yeah, if you want to, cause Don's, doing a, I guess it's like a Shark Tank like.
we call it a drive-by Shark Tank.
Oh, yeah.
That's in front of my coin.
Okay.
So,
So, yeah, go ahead and explain it.
well, it's Freedom Fest. It's called the Pitch Tank, and they scouted out 20 companies to go out to Vegas next month to actually set up a table. You have all these angel investors that come by, and then after 2 days, they'll pick the top 5 companies, and then the next day, the 5 companies that'll be in front of a panel of 5 judges, and then the next day, they'll announce a grand prize winner of what I understand to be about $125,000 in services. So we were picked as one of the 20 companies.
25,000 in services?
125,000 in
100?
services.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, so that's anywhere from coaching to web development, servicing, stuff like that.
And it's just a big show, it's anything and everything for all these companies?
I'll find out when I come back.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
when is that starting?
July 13th through the 16th.
Oh,
So George Foreman's he's the big headliner, and then you got Judge Andrew Biampalo from Fox and Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank, and then there's a panel of judges. One of them is the CEO of Whole Foods, would be one of the panel. So,
that could be looked up online?
I would imagine so.
What would it be called?
The Pitch Tank,
Oh,
Pitch Tank.
yeah,
Okay.
so.
So this is a ongoing thing. They repeat it.
Well, from my understanding, that they've only done one other one before this,
Okay.
and it's been pretty successful, so there might be something they'll do more of in the future. Yeah.
yeah. Huh.
So is it televised and everything?
I don't think so. It might be online, they might.
Yeah, at least it's gonna be a YouTube video.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it might be a YouTube video and some highlights up here and there, so. We'll find out.
Yeah.
That's good
All right.
information.
All right. Have a good one. Thanks for coming.
Have a good evening.
So, back to the statutory subject matter, new combinations and improvements, which really is what most inventions are. They're improvements of things or new combinations. They're certainly patentable. Like you can take a material that's well known in the public domain, but if you find a new use for it and there's a special process of doing that, like
That's kind of like what I did.
like a material that wasn't previously used in, say, batteries, and you put it in a battery and it can recharge a little faster. That's certainly patentable, of course.
In other words, that could be patentable.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's as far as the statutory subject matter. Just as long as it causes a change of state, and it's humanly created.
I kind of hardly wait to show you what I have,
Yeah.
because you said you do 5 fish.
Oh well, after the video we can.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we have no one else here.
When
So
you want,
I
you
guess
want to wait for more people to get here?
no, I'll just go ahead and finish Cause we're supposed to start at 7, so I guess
Oh.
I don't have much of a crowd. Usually, yeah, we have between 1 and 3 dozen, but sometimes more, sometimes less.
Oh,
Just depends. I think 2 weeks ago we had 20. That's because I'm an angel investor. It's
Really?
popular.
20
Yeah,
so it's always
it
different.
varies. Yeah. Um, so statutory subject matter. I mean, a lot of people in this group, you know, they do gadgets type things. You know, either machine or manufacturer. So statutory subject matter is easy. Of course, you're right. It's humanly created. It's not a product of nature. And so in the life science, chemistry, bio, sometimes there's some crossover questions, whether it's something that occurs in nature or artificial. And then in software, business methods, statutory subject matter can be a big deal. Because people, a lot of times they're trying to patent something pretty up in the air. You know, it's not real definite. And so the thing is, like a lot of those inventions, which not a lot of our people are into, but like there's 3 parts. It's like there's data out here. It can be public or private, right? There's just information, and then that feeds into a program that manipulates it, and then the program has an output. Okay, so to be patentable, the output has to cause what's called a change of state, or a decision to be made, or something definitive. The output can't be kind of up in the air. So let me give an example, it'll be clear. And it's not really that complicated, but let's say I'm doing a business method and I have like a marketing sales analysis program. So it gets this data in, marketing sales analysis, and it puts out a report. Okay, not really patentable, because the report just kind of sits there and doesn't cause anything to happen. So the report requires a human to look at it, interpret it, and make decisions based on it. So humans part of the process is not patentable. In other words, those kind of things to be patentable have to stand alone. So the output would have to cause certain things to happen. So another example, a financial analysis program, it takes data, it calculates, say, some sort of credit score for a loan application, and then it outputs whether you're approved or not approved based on the score. So that would be patentable. Why? Because that causes something definitive to happen. Like approved, not approved. The program does this all on its own, so that's good. So I tell people on software, you have to, the invention has to come down and anchor into a real world application and cause something to happen. It can't like spew out a result that is like just hanging there in the air
It has to
and
be
it doesn't
uniquely
different.
different.
Cause anything to happen. So we were kind of talking abstractly, but you got to think about, if you put it to examples, it's easier to understand. But like conversion programs are not necessarily patentable. What I mean, like, I wrote a program that converts dollars to pesos or something. So the output is pesos, which is an equivalent to dollars, but the output just sits there. It doesn't cause something to happen. So that wouldn't be patentable. Or you take, and again, it's like the marketing report. You take data, you make a report. Well, all you've really done is organized this data into a new form, but it's not doing anything.
Boy.
So it's all a little abstract, but that's the software and patenting. Those patents are harder to get than mechanical and electronic stuff. And
I mean, every year it seems like it's getting harder for people to get patents.
well, if anything, you got more prior art to deal with. And the patent office they're stricter on software inventions because they'd approved some iffy stuff in the late '90s, and there was some political issues, some political heat, and so they do. I think I have to give them a double approval by the supervisory examiner, which is fine. I mean, in the end, it acts to improve patent quality.
Does the patent office change rules and stuff like that every time they have a new president?
No.
That doesn't have anything to do with it, more or less?
No, it's they could initiate their own rule change, but it would there's an administrative approval process, and then I think ultimately it has to go through Congress. Now, sometimes in the interpretation of laws, the courts will interpret things certain ways,
Yeah.
and so that can modify on what does novelty really mean.
That's why it's so
Non-obviousness.
critical to word everything right when you're applying for a patent, right?
Yeah, that's part of it, but another part of it is what you do after you apply, like keeping track of modifications or improvements, and then when you get out and if you have sales success with the product, what you're doing commercially can help you too. We can talk about that in the obviousness thing, but like if your product's selling well, that's a secondary consideration that can help you on, say, non-obviousness. She said the market had a long felt need for this, that the public's embracing it. So that shows that this is something new.
Yeah.
Even if you're getting knocked off and copied, that's a positive, in that gives validity to your idea that someone's willing to steal it. We can argue that.
Yeah.
So that's a help too. So anyway, statutory subject matter, usually it's like no problem, unless you're in bio and life sciences or software and business methods. Then you kind of have to watch it. But if you've got gadgets, devices, stuff humanly created, usually no problem. So the second test is utility, and that kind of goes along with statutory subject matter, but it just means it has to have a beneficial use to the public. Well, most things, you're not going to have commercial success unless you've got a beneficial use to the public. That's what you're selling.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a given. Although, like a business method or software that doesn't have a definitive change of state, or what they call machine or transformation test,
Yeah.
they could say that lacks utility, because if I'm just putting out the marketing report and it just sits there, what's the benefit to the public? Well, nothing really. It's just sitting there. So, like I say, only if you're probably in life sciences or software, statutory subject matter, utility, or issues. So, if you're into gadgets and devices, you pass those two tests. So we move to novelty, and
So in the obviousness, that's more or less because I hear you have a better chance of getting a patent if you have a product that's uniquely different than anything else out there. Is that true, or?
yeah, that's what novelty and non-obviousness are. So when you say uniquely different, it's like, well, what does that really mean? So when the patent office, you file an application, they do their search. Okay. So that's what they call prior art. And they compare your claims to the prior art. Okay. So novelty just means that they have to find a single reference that has every element in your broadest claim. If not, they can't
That
reject
falls
it.
under novelty then.
Yeah. So it's like a single reference that is basically exactly your invention as claimed. Single reference. So usually most people pass that one because your preliminary search should pick that up. So That's usually not an issue and easier to get around with site plan amendments. Cause you just have to change one thing different and you're good. So I don't spend a whole lot of time on novelty because that's pretty easy to overcome. So non-obviousness basically says that, okay, the patent office, they might have 2 or 3, 4 references and they're combining bits and pieces of these 2, 3, or 4 references. Then they can make your invention. So each patent has a piece of it. That's usually the situation. So then you have to argue, you know, is it logical to make this combination in this field of art? You know, would it make sense? And would a person of this mythical, you know, ordinary skill in the art who is like someone experienced in this technology, not PhD level, but maybe technician level, would they think would it be common knowledge to know to make this combination?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a lot of what it's about. Now, obviousness, as an example, let's say your invention has 3 elements or components to it.
Mm-hmm.
And the patent office found component 1 in reference A, and they found component 2 in reference B. And they couldn't find component 3 in any reference. Okay, so that's looking pretty good on non-obviousness because they couldn't find that, but they might say this is ordinary skill in the art. It's kind of a gap filler. Like, well, people would know to do this, and then you can argue that with them.
Holy smokes.
So, how do we argue? What's it all mean? So, I don't want to leave things up in the air too much. But based on, you know, their manual, the examiner's manual, if you look at the bottom part of page 3, say 8th row, this is a sample of what they consider ordinary skill in the art. Now, you have to have the caveat that these things are with no change in end function. So, I say A is a size change. So you come in with a new invention, you change the size of it in relation to something else. But it does the same thing. They're going to say, that's ordinary skill in the art, not patentable. It's obvious.
Mm-hmm.
B, another one, material change. Now that one, you know, these things are all kind of conditional because like, that was based on what's called the Leshen case with the lipstick holder. Like in the 1960s, a lot of products were going from metal to plastic, right? So Leshen was making a lipstick holder out of plastic. It used to be made out of brass.
Yeah.
They want to get a patent on it, and so the patent office says that, you know, again, you just change the material, the function's the same. The material change was not done for consumer technical benefit, it was done for cutting manufacturing costs and economics. So, not patentable, same
Yeah.
function. That give you an idea. But, going back to a battery, if I changed material in the battery could have a new function, right? It could charge faster, just charge slower, something like that. That's totally patentable. So the material change thing, you gotta kind of qualify.
So that improvement there means a lot to the patent office as far as the ruling and everything in their eyes.
Because if you change material in something and it can operate hotter, it can operate colder, it can operate in a corrosive environment, that could be patentable.
You mean like kind of like a regular battery to lithium batteries?
Totally, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a total different thing. They both do the same thing, but this will last way longer.
And then if, like C, making portable, that's just like, oh, I converted a plug-in radio to a battery. Okay, these days that's considered ordinary skill. So common. Okay? So, you know, like F and G, you know, making integral, making separable, making continuous. But a lot of these things, I mean, if we can show there's a change in function, like the battery example, you certainly can move into patentability. But this just gives you kind of a sampling of, you know,
Of what
if they
the
can't
board-
find a piece of your invention in the prior art, so no doubt you pass novelty. But they can always come back and say, well, this mythical person of ordinary skill in the art would know to do this.
Yeah.
And then you have to think of these creative arguments to show, no, they wouldn't. No one else has done it. It's not out there, right?
Yeah.
On and on. So, how do you fight these things? Well, if you look at the top part of page 3, this is where I was talking about your sales. Like if you have good sales, if you're getting copied, those are benefits to you. Because we can show, oh man, people are stealing this technology. It must be good.
Yeah.
You know, failure of others to solve